Good morning, church family. Welcome to our Sunday service. Really great to have you all here. I hope you've had a really good morning and you're all comfortable, ready to hear the word and just enjoy the community we can have together. Speaking of community, if you want to comment or say something about the message or to anyone while we're watching this, feel free to jump into the comments and just say something, say hi to everyone, just say hello really. I hope you've all been having a really good week. Really great to have you all here, and I look forward to hearing what Geoff is going to tell us later on. It's been a really good week. We've had a lot of rain recently, which has been, I love seeing the rain, just really cool. I'm gonna now throw over to the kids ministry.
Hey kids, we're really missing you here at Kids Church. If you think that big church can get just a little bit boring, then if you head to the Mill Park Baptist Church website, we've got some really cool resources there for you. I hope you guys are having a nice break from your online schooling. I know I am. And stay safe. Have a good one. See you later.
Thank you, Isaac. That was really good. I know the online classes can be a bit draining, but along with Isaac, I hope all you kids going well, and all you secondary students, I hope you're going well as well. So now I believe it's time for Geoff to jump in with the message. He's going to be continuing our series of Peter, just a Fisherman. And today's one is, if you want to follow Jesus. Go ahead, Geoff.
Hey, good morning. I was a young cop and I was called into the Chief Commissioner's office one day, and I found out when I got there, it was so he could surprise me and tell me personally that I was going to receive an award. Now, until then, I'd read about this guy. I'd seen him, S.I. Miller, better known as Mick Miller. But I never met him. And I'll never forget that afternoon sitting in his 10th floor office looking out over the Port of Melbourne and Westgate Bridge and just in awe, totally enamoured with this once in a lifetime statesman leader. And it wasn't long after that encounter I actually started working in the police station on the ground floor of police headquarters. And it was well known that Mick Miller, the chief's driver, every morning would pick him up from his home and drive him nearly into the city. He'd drop him off and the chief would go for a walk. And then after a while, the driver would pick him up again and drive him the rest of the way. They'd come in. And normally, because it was before hours, they'd need to actually enter police headquarters through the police station. So if you're working night shift, you would sometimes actually see the chief come in. Always just before 6 o'clock in the morning. And he'd come in, he'd be fresh as a daisy, he'd be in his suit, and he just walked and talked and carried himself in a way. It just called out to me to follow him. Honestly, I've never known another man like him. I remember one morning I was just near the finish of my night shift, and in he came and he walked past me in the corridor and he saw me, and without a moment's hesitation he said, "Good morning, Jeffrey." As I stood to attention and said, "Good morning, sir." Astoundingly impressive, attractively compelling, incredible man, this guy. And I wanted to be just like him. And I even told him that, because that day when I was in his office having a cup of tea with him, he said to me, "So Jeffrey, what would you like to do in your career?" You know what I said? I looked straight back at him and I said, "Sir, one day I'd like to do your job." My friend is the chaplain for a Filipino national basketball team, and he snapped this photo of the coach. Can you see the coach there? And his boy beside him. Hey, who do you want to copy? Who do you want to be like? Peter, just a fisherman, this ordinary, hot-tempered, brash, rough and ready guy from our last couple of weeks together, don't you? And you captivate him by him because the longer this goes on, the more you're starting to see yourself in him. Maybe not that you're angry or loud or strong-willed or that you're a professional fisherman, but that you're ordinary. Yeah, you're ordinary, and you never really thought that you'd leave much of a footprint here on earth, did you? And thus far, you know that Peter's decided to follow Jesus because after he did what Jesus invited him to do and took his boat out in the deeper water and fished all over again in the morning after fishing all night the night before and catching nothing. And then after Jesus told him, you're not going to be fishing the lake anymore, you're going to be joining me on my mission and fishing for people. Then he left his boat and his nets and he followed Jesus. Now, right now, it's safe to assume, don't you think, that as Peter follows Jesus, that's when life starts taking on its meaning for him. That's when he starts being the rock that Jesus told him he would be. You know what, though? Following Jesus, that's becoming a disciple of a rabbi. It's what it's called in first century Palestine. One of the ways of understanding that, which was commonly understood, unmistakably understood and commonly accepted for people, was if you're going to follow the rabbi, the dust that he's going to flick up from his sandals is going to land on you. That's how closely you're following him. Because to follow the rabbi at its most rudimentary level actually means to copy him. So you are just a teacher or a single parent or a personal care attendant or a cop or a midwife. But God didn't put you here on earth to sit in your boat on the shore. A ship in the harbour's safe, but that's not what ships are made for. God knit you together. You're his masterpiece. You're his handiwork. And he did it so that you can live the life that he destined you to live. And believe me, that's anything but just an ordinary life. So you're getting an inkling, from Peter, just a fisherman, aren't you? You're getting an inkling that if you follow Jesus, that's when life will start to take on its God-given meaning. Because you see, if you want to follow Jesus, you'll have to copy him. And you're asking, just like I am, well, if following Jesus means copying him, how do I do that? How do I know what I need to copy? Now grab your Bible, my friend, because it's early in the time when Peter's following Jesus now. And if you come take a look at this with me for a few minutes this morning, you're going to walk out, you're going to walk out knowing that following Jesus, all right, stop there for a second. Following Jesus, I think we all recognize that it was following Jesus that made Peter much, much more than just a fisherman. You walk out knowing that following Jesus just means a few things. Look what happens in Mark chapter 1. This is right after Peter and his brother Andrew and James and his brother John had started following Jesus. They go to Capernaum. Now you see it on the map there. It's up on the northwestern tip of the Sea of Galilee. You see the Mediterranean Sea out to the left. Every Sabbath day, we're told, in Mark chapter 1, Jesus and his friends would go to the local synagogue, and often when they were there, Jesus would teach the people. It says in verse 22, they were amazed at his teaching, for he taught as one who had real authority. Now, friends, there are speakers and there are preachers. And there are speakers and there are preachers. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Some speakers and preachers shouldn't be speakers and preachers. Some should. This guy, when Jesus teaches, the people conclude, hey, he's got a clue. His teaching packs weight. It's real. It's relevant. Makes sense. It's helpful. It's not some religious gobbledygook that sounds sophisticated and cultured, but in reality makes no difference in my life. One Sabbath, though, they're there in the synagogue. Why? Look what happens. It's in verse 23. A man possessed by an evil spirit was in the synagogue, and he began shouting, "Why are you bothering us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One sent from God." Jesus cut him short. "Be silent. Come out of the man." And at that, the evil spirit screamed, threw the man into a convulsion, but then he left him. There's a confrontation and a showdown between Jesus and an evil spirit. And Jesus knows that spirit, he recognizes it, he calls it, and then he exercises his clear authority over it. It says in verse 27, amazement gripped the audience, and they began to discuss what had happened. "What sort of new teaching is this?" they asked excitedly. See, following Jesus, there's full-on experience, number one, for Peter. He sees it with his own eyes and he listens to it with his own ears, and I'm following him. I'm following him, he says to himself. Well, then Jesus and his buddies leave the synagogue and they go over to Peter and Andrew's home. James and John, they score an invite as well. And as they all get to the house, Peter's wife slips out the front door and she whispers in Peter's ear, hey, her mother, his mother-in-law, is sick in bed with a high fever. So touching. Jesus goes to her bedside, takes her by the hand, and then helps her to sit up. And then the fever suddenly leaves her, so she gets up and makes them dinner. Full-on experience number two. The rabbi was so tender with her. And I'm following him. And then look in verse 32. That evening, it's at sunset. It says, many sick and demon-possessed people were brought to Jesus, and a huge crowd of people from all over Capernaum gathered outside the door to watch. And Peter, he's right there. He keeps seeing it with his own eyes and hearing it with his own ears. And he knows that he left his boat and fishing nets and chose to follow this guy. And he's watching him in action until late at night, he sees Jesus stacking them up out the door, healing great numbers of sick people who had many different kinds of diseases, it says, and ordering many demons to come out of their victims. I'm following this guy. Full-on experience number three. It's all in a day. And then after that, they're fried. Totally drained by late night time. And everyone falls into bed. Peter's and Andrew's home. They pull out the mattresses and the couch and they all fall into bed and they're toasted. But then check verse 35. The next morning, Jesus awoke long before daybreak and went out alone into the wilderness to pray. And later Simon, that's Peter, remember, and the others, they went out to find him. They said, everyone's asking for you. But he replied, we must go into other towns as well, and I'll preach to them too, because that's why I came. Now maybe it's not so much of a full-on event, but hey, it's attention grabbing in the extreme. Because everyone is exhausted. It's only just a few hours short sleep. It's not an 8-hour sleep. And then Jesus is up out of bed and gone from the house way before daybreak. And friends, the only reason he's gone from the house is so he can pray. You see, Peter is learning, friends, and he's learning really fast because he's following this guy, and that means he's copying him, because that's what a disciple does with his rabbi. And he's learning just like you. You see, if you want to copy Jesus, it means a few basic assumptions. Sure, you don't want to be just a fisherman. or an old age pensioner or a student, you don't want to be just here making up the numbers. So you're asking, like many of us are, maybe all of us are asking, well, if following Jesus means copying him, how do I do that? How do I know what I need to copy? And you see, Peter here, 24 hours in the life of this fisherman, he's asking exactly the same question. And he's learning a few things. They're just basic. They're just intrinsic to who Jesus is. So when you see Jesus and you start to learn about Jesus, then you start to know what you need to copy. Jesus, if he's stepping into your boat, my friend, and taking you offshore, you'll be wanting to copy him. And a few basic assumptions. Here's the first one. Jesus attracts spiritual warfare. They're in church and it's quiet, right? And then there's a scream. And it seems like this captive and unwilling soul has been made the organ of an alien and compelling spirit. It's an unclean spirit. Who knows how long it had tormented this man. But make no mistake though, whatever it was and however it happens, it was startling and it was alarming and it was maybe even terrifying. I had a man confront me once in church. It wasn't at Mill Park Baptist Church. Different church. But honestly, I think it was an evil spirit in this guy. What I know is that morning there were kids crying, there were people gasping, and it was absolutely disturbing. It was traumatic for people. You know, it says in God's word, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, it says, when we're following Jesus, we're not fighting against people made of flesh and blood. We're fighting against the evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world. Against those mighty powers of darkness who rule this world and against wicked spirits in the heavenly realm. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 3, even though we live as human beings, we do not wage war according to human standards. For the weapons of our warfare are not human weapons. You see, if you're going to follow Jesus, I'm telling you now, spiritual warfare is inevitable. In other words, there are all sorts of things that are going on around you and before you and behind you. And whether you see it or not, they reach into your health, into your mind, into your relationships, into your perceptions, and they're unseen in the natural world. But they're way bigger than flesh and blood. So what are you going to do? Because remember, if you want to follow Jesus, you'll have to copy him. So what are you going to do? You're going to have to start learning. So you can wise up to your enemy. Your enemy, your adversary, the Bible tells us. He's like a roaring lion. He's prowling around looking for someone to devour, least of all you. And you'll be learning quick, just like Peter, that greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. You'll be wising up to his schemes and his methods and his strategies. If you want to follow Jesus, you'll have to copy him. Now, another assumption, if you're following Jesus, which means that you're copying him, is that Jesus is gentle. It does something deep inside me when I see gentleness displayed. Like this day, Jesus taking this woman's hand and helping her sit up in bed. And Peter, when he's watching all this, and it's his mother-in-law that it's happening to, like he's strong, he's forceful, he's vehement, he's got a loud voice. I bet she's a fast walker, he's probably got a heavy foot tread. And he watches Jesus that day with tender gentleness. And he starts grasping that the world needs tenderness as well as it needs strength. And probably that strength is never perfected till it's tender. So look what Peter himself wrote. It wasn't all that long after this happened. It's in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 4 and verse 8. He said, "You should be known for the beauty that comes from within. The unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is so precious to God. All of you should be of one mind, full of sympathy toward each other, loving one another with tender hearts and humble minds." If you want to follow Jesus, you'll have to copy him. And Peter's learning to copy. And another assumption, just a basic assumption to following Jesus. Jesus is compassionate. It's right in Peter's face, the anguish of this one community in Capernaum. It's all just in 24 hours. All these people who were diseased and distressed and possessed, and together with their agonized friends, like they're seemingly all at Peter's house. And Peter's realizing what a massive misery and pain, and it lives on his street. Just like it lives on yours and mine. And Peter saw it right there. You check out in the Bible books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they're the accounts of Jesus' life on earth. You tell me if I'm wrong, whether it's a single leper or a whole crowd, my friend, Jesus is always is moved with compassion in the presence of human need. It's the broken heart that heals hearts. In Matthew chapter 9, that's another time in Jesus' life. It says, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless. They were like sheep without a shepherd. And he said to his disciples, the harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest and ask him to send more workers into his fields. You see, for Jesus, it's not just feeling nice feelings to people who are hurting, but it's feeling compassion for people who are lost. I haven't got compassion, Geoff. What are you saying? I'm just being honest, I haven't got compassion. I'm selfish. Wish I had compassion. But I haven't. I wish I cared for lost people, but I don't. My friend, listen carefully. You simply cannot be passive on this. Because it will not change. To the degree that you're not compassionate, you have to put yourself in situations so that your lack of compassion will be exposed. And also, you'll have to knock the door down to Jesus, asking him, relentlessly asking him for his compassion for a world in anguish to take over your heart. If you want to follow Jesus, you'll have to copy him. And just one more assumption about Jesus is that he prays a lot. You tell me if I'm wrong. You go look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Especially go looking in Luke, because a real emphasis of Luke is of Jesus in prayer. You tell me if I'm wrong. He prays a lot. His human nature needed to be renewed and recharged. I mean, he's God, but he's man. And Peter saw this. They get up and he's gone. Peter never forgot his master's habit. And he really clearly made up his mind to copy it. You skip forward a few years and you'll see Peter. He's a key part of the early church. And then when you see that, you'll see that they don't just like pray while they're doing what they're doing, because that's popular today. And it's really good to pray while, Geoff, I just pray while I'm gardening. I just pray when I'm driving to work. I just pray throughout the day. That's great. Please do. But you see, Jesus got up that morning and left the house for no other reason than to pray. Dedicated prayer. And so you'll see, if you go forward a few years and you watch Peter in action, you'll see not just a bit of prayer on the go. And you won't just see, we've got to pray at the end of the meeting. And it's not just like, well, we're in the synagogue, we have to have a prayer. Now you'll see a man with his friends who is radically dedicated to prayer. In the Bible, in Ephesians chapter 6, I want to read to you from verse 13 in the Message version. You think about following Jesus and copying Jesus and what we've seen in that 24 hours. You think of that and then how it ties this together. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 13. Be prepared. You're up against far more than you can handle on your own. Take all the help you can get. Get every weapon that God has issued so that when it's all over but the shouting, you'll still be on your feet. This is big stuff, friends. It says there, truth, righteousness, faith, peace, and salvation. They're more than words. Learn how to apply them. You'll need them throughout your life. God's word, that's an indispensable weapon. And in the same way, prayer is essential in this ongoing warfare. Pray hard and long. Pray for your brothers and sisters. Keep your eyes open. If you want to follow Jesus, you'll have to copy him. All right, time for some tough questions. Ready? Ready for some tough questions? Because if you want to follow Jesus, you'll have to copy him. So I need to ask you then, if you want to copy Jesus, are you alert and learning and active in spiritual warfare? Alert, learning, exploring, open to, or head in the clouds, not seeing the things that are unseen? If you want to copy Jesus, you'll be alert and learning and active. Yeah, in spiritual warfare. Next question, next tough question. Are you committed to and growing in gentleness? If you want to copy Jesus, you will be. Next tough question. If you want to copy Jesus, are you assertive, not passive, about developing and increasing compassion in your life? Because it will not change by accident. You need to put yourself in situations where your lack of compassion will be exposed. So there's the tough question. Are you assertive, not passive, about developing and increasing compassion? Yeah. And then one last tough question. Are you praying? Are you praying? Friends, if you want to follow Jesus, you'll have to copy him. And if you're not yet following Jesus, you can be. You can be in a few minutes from now. Because Jesus died on the cross so that he could do more than just sort of create this nice story. He died on the cross to save you from your sin, the sin nature, and to pay the penalty for that, like to take the punishment for it so that you wouldn't have to. But far more than that. He died on the cross so that you wouldn't need to sit in your boat on the shore. So you go out in the deep water and live the life that he designed you to live. If you don't know Jesus yet, if you're not following Jesus yet, you know, God promises that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. You can be. So let me pray with you. Lord Jesus, thanks for reminding us about following you and that it means copying you. And for my friends who are here now that want to copy you, we're asking for your help. And for my friends who are here who are not yet following and therefore copying Jesus, friends, all you got to do is reach out to him. You don't have to understand it all. You don't have to get it all. All you got to do is reach out. Jesus, thank you so much that you came to earth and you died a criminal's death for me. And I appreciate so much, and I accept and I receive your forgiveness. And I surrender to you. I want to live the life that you've asked me to live. So we thank you. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Amen.
Hey, thanks, Geoff. That was a really powerful word from God with a lot of hard-hitting questions there. I know I was challenged on quite a few of them. Am I committed to and growing in gentleness? Not always, but I definitely want to, and I know that's an area I can grow in. Not being passive and assertive in being compassionate and putting myself in those days where I'm pushed beyond what I'm capable of in my compassion. I don't always do that, and I definitely want to grow in that. And in regards to prayer, I quite often find it hard to set aside time to just sit in committed prayer. But I want to copy Jesus, and Geoff has just highlighted for us all how important that is. But just remember, church family, that we do have God's Spirit with us, and through his Spirit, we are capable of doing anything he asks of us. We are capable of all those things Geoff was talking about. Yeah. Thanks again, Geoff. That was a really awesome word from God. Love hearing you speak. Really good to see you again this Sunday. I just want to thank you, church family, for your continued financial support of the church in this time of isolation. It just blows me away how in this time when it can be so easy to think of ourselves, that the support for the church is still ongoing and we're still able to function at a somewhat reduced capacity, but to the best we can do in this situation. And I am just blown away by our church family, and just want to encourage you to keep supporting the church in any way you can. The details will be on screen now. Thanks, Ramon. What a legend. Yeah, thank you, church family, again. I hope that you have a really good rest of your Sunday. God bless over this next week, and I look forward to next week, next service on Sunday. God bless. See you later.